Grief doesn't come with instructions. There is no map, no timeline, no easy way forward, but every day, people find the strength to keep going, to rebuild their lives, and to carry the memories of the ones they love. This is Strength After Sorrow.
Welcome back to Strength After Sorrow. I'm Jeff Sandman. Today I wanted to talk about something that changed the way I look at my life. I kind of briefly mentioned it in the last episode about a tagline that I came up with about being a victor and not a victim. So what I wanted to do today was cover a little bit about that, talking about what it means, I guess, to be a victim and also what it means to be a victor. Tragedy happens in life. We all go through different things. We definitely did. As I shared in that first episode, that we lost our son back in 2019 to a drug overdose. He was 26 years old when he passed away. It's not something that me as a dad ever planned on, and it's certainly not something that parents ever really plan on. They say that there's a natural progression. You kind of expect for your parents to pass away, but you don't plan on outliving your kids. So it's just one of those things that happen in our life. And I had a choice. Again, like I said, I could be a victor or I could be a victim. I could let that, what happened, tear me down and beat me down and keep me down, or I could take that and learn to grow from it. So a lot of times when you're going through different things, there's some different questions that can come up. Why did this happen to me? Or, my life is ruined. I'll never be the same. There's so many of those things that, can start coming out, and it's really easy to get tied in with those phrases. And like I said, faith is going to come up in my conversation, and the Bible talks about taking every thought captive. And that's no different in normal life. There's times in life that things come at you and you just have to grab a hold of them and just say, no, I'm not going to think this way anymore. I'm not going to allow myself to go down this rabbit hole or to get sucked into this, pit. So you just have to make that choice. Say, no, not today, not today. And one of the phrases that we used to say is, not today, Satan, not today. And you know what? If you're not a believer, just say, you know what? Not today, world. Not today. You're not getting me. You're not going to have me. You're not going to steal my joy. You're not going to steal my life. So it's just an attitude that when you're not dwelling on the negative things that you're able to get, when you're dwelling on those negative things, you just can't get out of it. And, there's plenty of studies out there. You can read books on it. You could look up different things about our mind and negative thoughts and positive thoughts and different things. And you can clearly see that when you are stuck in some of those negative thoughts, it will spiral you down and it will not let you up. And when you start looking at the positive, it starts lifting you up, and then you're able to see other positive things that are happening around you. When you start looking at the beauty of nature, then you start seeing other things. If you just focus on, that there's my wife, okay? My wife hates bugs. And here we are in Texas. Well, guess what we have? We have a lot of bugs. And we sat outside, and she has a hard time enjoying it because the bugs just love coming around her. And she is so focused on those bugs flying around her that she can't enjoy the nice weather outside. And then she ends up going back inside. And here I am, I'm just minding my own business. If they fly around me, they fly around me. I'm not focused on them. I'm just focused on enjoying the weather, enjoying the ability to be able to sit outside. And so that's kind of a generic mindset look, but it's the same way in life. We can continue, I could have taken that time after our son passed and just said, you know what, this is just so unfair and it's not supposed to happen to me. And why'd you take him from me, God? Why me? Why this? Why that? Or, I could have just started dwelling on even thoughts of what if I would have, what if I could have. And from the very beginning, that was something that my wife and I told each other that we will not get wrapped up in. We will not get wrapped up in the what ifs. What if we could have? What if we, and I just didn't, because I knew that could get me down a rabbit hole that isn't healthy for me. And it wasn't until here recently, I'll give him some props. I don't know him. I've listened to some of his stuff, but his name's Peter Crone, and he has this saying that I absolutely just love. He says, what happened, happened, and couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. You can't get any more plain than that. You can't change what happened in the past. All you can do is change how you're going to react, or what you're going to learn from the past, and take that to the present and the future. So that was just kind of our mindset back then. And we were, like I said, we were not going to fall into that. What if I would have checked on our son a little bit sooner? Well, guess what? I didn't. And I can't go back. I can't beat myself up. I can't sit here and lay blame on me or anything else. Our son made a choice, and that was how it has to be. And I can't change that. So, a couple other things that, what I'm talking about, being the victim. And unfortunately, we kind of live in a time right now where I really see it a lot. There's a lot of the victim mentality in the world right now. You owe me this, you owe me that. And well, my ancestors this, my ancestors that. I'm like, we could go all the way back, but guess what? We're not there anymore. I completely removed from them. I am in a nation that they weren't even. I'm not where my ancestors came from anymore. I can't change what happened to my ancestors. I can definitely appreciate where I came from. And I have so many different things probably inside of me. I know I'm part Swedish. I think I'm part Spanish. I don't know what else I am. And I'm not going to do one of the, the ancestry things just to find out what I am or anything like that, because to me, it really doesn't matter. I'm an American. I live here in the state of Texas now. I came from Wyoming. I was born here, but back in Wyoming a couple months later, Dad got out of Vietnam, and this is where he was stationed, was down in Texas. A few months later, I don't know exactly when, but we were back in Wyoming, and that was where I spent my life, was in Wyoming. So I'm a Wyoming boy, and here I am now in Texas, and that's just who I am. I'm me. And my ancestors aren't going to change that. And so I'm not going to take that as me having an opportunity to be a victim. And I'm not going to, even things that I went through as a kid, I will not take that as being a victim. Don't get me wrong. I had a great childhood. Yeah, I came from a divorced house, but I didn't feel unloved from either side. So there's no woe is me, I grew up in this or I grew up in that. I just, I grew up and I was protected. I was taken care of by both my mom and my stepdad. I was taken care of by my dad. And I have no complaints. Anything that I became is because of how I decided to respond to that time in my life. And I made choices. I made choices that I shouldn't have made, but again, I can't go back and change those because it already happened. So all I can do is take that as a learning opportunity and just move forward. So again, like I said, when I realized that I had a choice, and I think that was probably, in the very beginning, I knew that that was something that we had to decide whether or not we were going to be a victor or a victim, basically. And that wasn't what I thought about back then. It wasn't, hey, you know what? We're going to be victors in this. We're going to just overcome and we're going to come out on top, and, our story is going to be great. At that time, it was really easy for us to just, you know what, all I want to do is just curl up in a ball and just disappear from everybody. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to share my story. I didn't want to look at pictures of our son. And I mean, I remember my wife, we had a box with all of his pictures, and it was quite a while before we ever actually even got that box out and looked at it. And I think our youngest daughter, she wanted to look at it a few times. But my wife just did not want to get that out. But after some time, then some of that healing kind of came, and we let go of some things, and we were able to actually get that box open and take a look at some things. But it wasn't right away. And please don't ever take this that we lost our son and then overnight, here I was, I'm out on the stage ranting and raving going, hey, you know what? We're going to be victors and we're not going to be victims. Because that was not how it was at all, not even by a long shot. There was a very long road in that. You know, going to grief groups and different things like that. A person had dropped a care package off at our doorstep, and there was a book in there, and it was of another family that had lost a child. So I have never been one of those that really is much of a reader. I'll grab a few things and I start reading, but I never finish it. Well, I had a really hard time putting that book down. I couldn't put it down because as I was reading it, I was listening to what they were talking about, and I was hearing their emotions of what they were going through as they had lost a child. And it hit me. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm feeling right now. And that was one of the first moments that I actually realized maybe I'm not alone in this. Maybe I'm not the only one feeling this way. And, you know, I'll be 100% honest. That's not something that I really would talk about with my wife. I wouldn't talk about how I was feeling or, you know, the emotions that I was going through. Unfortunately, it just wasn't who I was. And I'm getting better at that. I'm sharing things with my wife now. I actually have conversations with her and, you know, I let her know what's going on. And sometimes it takes a while. I'll be honest. Almost every time it takes a while. It's usually a day or two, and then I will open up, and she knows something's going on. She'll ask me, are you okay? Are you okay? And then finally I'll open up. She's like, I knew something was going on. So I'm starting to open up to her. But back then, I would not. Absolutely not. I'm not going to, because my mentality was I didn't want to burden her with what I was feeling because she was already going through enough, is the way my mind was thinking, which isn't the way to think. We're in this together. We're supposed to be partners, like I shared in the first episode, you know, of what she told me, that she needed to know that I was going through things. She needed to know that I was struggling as well because she felt like she was just losing her mind. Like she was in this, the only one going crazy, which she wasn't. You know, we're all going crazy. And I'm not exactly sure where I was there. I just kind of, my mind just went off here. You know, that's how this podcast is going to be. I want this podcast to be, you know, authentic. I want it to be real. There's going to be very few edits on this. I might take out a couple of words here or there that I think didn't need to be there or something like that. And of course, the more I do this, the more comfortable I'm going to get. This isn't something that I do. So the more I do it, the more comfortable I'll be, you know, just staring at this screen, actually having a conversation with hopefully you. But right now, I'm just talking to myself. I'm talking to a computer screen, and it's kind of weird. It's not something that I normally do, but this is how I want that podcast to be. You know, if I lose a train of thought, I'm going to lose a train of thought. I do have kind of some bullet points so that way I can kind of stay on track, but I may go off on some rabbit holes and not actually get to the message that I was wanting to, but we'll see how that goes. Well, so for me, what does being a victor actually mean? It doesn't mean that I'm not hurting. It doesn't mean that I'm over it. It doesn't mean that I forgot the person that I lost, because that is actually has been one of my fears, that I would forget our son. And that is something that I never want to do. I don't ever want to forget him. I mean, he's a part of our life. He'll always be. And as far as I'm concerned, I will always be his dad. Even though he's not here, he's still my son and I'm still his dad. And nobody can take that away from me. So again, it doesn't mean that I'm not hurting, because yeah, there's days that's, I definitely hurt. And it's one of those, a lot of times it just kind of sneaks up on me too. And I don't realize until after I kind of sit down and start thinking about it. It's like, what was going on today? Why was I in that mood? Why was I acting that way, or whatever it was? And it usually comes back to, that's probably what was going on. I was just, whether it was around a birthday or around that time of when he passed, or maybe it was a holiday or something else, or maybe I saw something and I'm like, that would have reminded me of him, or gee, what would have he thought about that? Whatever it was. And again, like I said, it doesn't mean that I'm over it. I'm never going to be 100% over this. It's just something you don't get over. But you change. But for me, being a victor means that I refuse to let tragedy define the rest of my life. I keep moving forward, and I want to honor the person that I lost by how I live. I was listening to a podcast today, actually. Weird thing about that. You listen to things and it just speaks to you. Well, he was talking about a post-traumatic growth. He was talking about with some military people and stuff like that, having PTSD. And then he brought up the term post-traumatic growth. And I didn't know whether or not a friend of his had came up with that or not. So I looked it up. So post-traumatic growth, or PTG, is the positive psychological, mental, and emotional transformation experienced after enduring a highly challenging life crisis or trauma. It was coined by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun. It represents a profound gradual shift in perspective, not merely a return to normalcy. It often coexists with, rather than replaces, distress. So key aspects of post-traumatic growth is there's new possibilities. You identify new paths, interests, or life directions, your personal strength. You're recognizing greater inner resilience and confidence. There's improved relationships, developing deeper intimacy, empathy, and closeness with others. I can tell you that is 100% true for me. I really took an inventory of things, of my relationships, especially with my family, mostly with my immediate family, my wife and my kids and my grandkids. That pretty much became my main focus. And to be honest, it wasn't before this. It was, yeah, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a grandpa, and I get it, kind of beat on my chest and go, yeah, that's who I am when I'm having a conversation with somebody. But did I actually spend that time with them that I was supposed to? And after this had happened, I really started, things that I used to think were important were no longer that important anymore. And not saying that, I had to change everything. It was just where I was. I loved playing disc golf. I loved going and playing in disc golf tournaments. And then all of a sudden, playing in disc golf tournaments wasn't as important to me as, I've got a whole Saturday that I get to spend with my family. And doesn't mean that I'm not ever going to go play disc golf or go play in a tournament. I love doing, CrossFit competitions. I would go down and maybe do a 2-day competition or a 1-day competition. And, I used to do a lot of things where I would try to kind of fit those in. if I did this, then maybe my wife would let me do this one or this one. But then it just didn't mean as much to me to do those things, knowing that, hey, you know what? I'm just going to hang out with the family. And I still do my stuff. I still exercise. I still go ride my mountain bike. I still do things. I do, some disc golf, but it's not, I would say it's not with the same selfishness that I had before. I definitely had a selfishness because it was something that I desired doing. So I was doing things to try to get to do those things. And now I actually desire to spend time with my family. And if one of those things happens to intermingle with that, then that's great. I mean, my youngest daughter, she likes to go ride mountain bikes with me. I need to get her a new one because she seems to think that, she needs to keep growing. That's what happens when you're 13 and you start shooting up again. So this will be the second bike that I get her since we got down to Texas 3 years ago. So hopefully it's going to be the last one, or at least as far as having to get a bigger one. Maybe we'll upgrade to a better bike. So, that's something I get to enjoy with her. And in the meantime, I get to go mountain biking. And, I like to work out in my garage, and sometimes the grandkids, they come out and, they'll do things with me or whatever. And I love doing that. So, it's just some different things that I get to intermingle my desires with the family as well. Going for walks with my wife or whatever it is, or just going and doing something, just spending that time. And I enjoy spending time with my family now. And I think it was that shift in my thought pattern. And to go on here, see here, appreciation of life, gaining a new sense of gratitude and perspective on life's value, a spiritual existential change, a deeper understanding or strengthening of personal, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs. For me, that wasn't the case. I was already a believer for quite some time. So my faith definitely helped me stay rooted and grounded and not get, I guess, I really have to say that it did help me not get beat up so much. I was able to stand, and I was able to know, just being in the Word enough and having a relationship with Christ long enough to know that that's not something that God didn't need another angel or anything like that, or whatever the other nuanced sayings that people say, because I know that's not how God works. God doesn't just, well, you know what, I'm gonna steal them from you, or I need another angel up here, and that's just not how it works. So I was rooted and grounded enough to know that that was not the case. So for me, it was just, I knew there was choices and there's consequences. There's consequences for every one of our choices, and those consequences can sound essentially bad, but in a way, there's a result for every one of our actions. Let's just say that, because consequences is pretty much a negative connotation. But every action has a reaction. So if you're going to do something, and, in his case, shooting up, and he was clean, and what they think happened is that he tried probably doing the original amount that he was used to when he was using regularly, and it was too much for his body. So there was an action and there was a reaction. So, and just, if I hit the wall after I found out, guess what? There's going to be, that was an action, and there's going to be a react. My hand's going to hurt. So, that's just one of those things that you got to know that there's that type of thing going on. So sorry, a little glitch on the computer there. Like I said, this is going to be 100% raw. So for me, again, that's what being a victor is really about, is taking that mindset and turning it into something for growth. What can I do with this? Am I going to be able to use my story? Am I going to be able to share my story with somebody and hopefully get them through? And I look around and I can see, well, what are they going through? And I could go, I know kind of what they're going. I don't know exactly. It doesn't matter. yeah, we lost our child, but that doesn't mean I know exactly what their feelings are. So I know in a roundabout way about what they're going through. So I can be there for them. I can share my story. I can let them know, what I was feeling, which is why I'm doing this podcast. It's so that you guys, whoever is listening, can grab a hold of this and go, so I'm not the only one that's going through this. He went through this as well. So I'm not alone in this. I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind or anything like that. Somebody else has gone through, just like when I read that book, it was like she was describing everything that I was feeling. And I want this podcast to be that same type of thing, to where when you're hearing this, you can go, wow, that is exactly what I was feeling. So that's maybe something that might come up later. So, okay, I'm prepared. There was plenty of things in our life that, afterwards I would have never even thought about, and I'll get into some of that stuff, in some future episodes. But so the next thing I've got here is how strength started showing up. So again, like I said earlier, this was not an overnight thing. This was definitely a process and continues to be a process. Like I shared in the first episode, I enjoy lifting. I do different things. I did CrossFit for several years. I coached it. Now that I'm down here in Texas, I don't have a CrossFit gym. The one that I did find is about a half an hour away from me. There's some here local, but I'm leaving in the morning when they're having their classes, and then I'm coming back at night from work and when they're finishing their classes, because I actually work about an hour away from where I live. So, but that's okay. And, I do definitely miss the community, but this is my season of that not being part of it. So it's okay. I got my stuff here in the garage that I can work out with. I've got some gyms that I can go to over in the town where I work. So it's not a big deal. And my work pays for it. So that's the nice thing, is they actually provide, well, they pay for it and I pay for it. They take money out of my check every paycheck, but I get to have a membership I think I've got a membership at 5 or 6 different gyms, just depending on what town I'm in. So, which for me is kind of weird, being down here in Texas. I drive a lot. I go from one town to the next town, and it's a lot different than when I was in Wyoming. I pretty much did my stuff right there in one town, but here it's, you go from one town to the next and it's 20 minutes away or a half hour away or an hour and a half away or whatever it is. But so lifting has been one of those foundational things for me, whether it was just a CrossFit style workout, or I love putting together just some, grunt style workouts where I would just run around and carry heavy things or whatever it was. And now that I've got down here, I just kind of started focusing on strength and doing some different things. And now I've been doing a lot of sandbag type of style, strongman sandbag training, which has been a blast. I really like it because it's just, you just have to kind of push through it an awful lot. Like the last few years, it's just something, there's something there, an obstacle, and you just have to push your way through it. Again, strength showed up through my faith, and continue to try to grow that. And I mentioned in the first episode that I've got another podcast that I'm doing as well, I call it Unshaken Identity, which is focused on knowing who you are in Christ. And if you know who you are in Christ, then the enemy can't tell you otherwise. And I started it for 2 reasons. Number one, God gave me the idea. Since I've been down here, I haven't really been teaching or anything like I used to. I used to teach Bible school, or when pastor would be gone, he would have me do a message, for a Sunday or a Wednesday night, whatever it was. And since I've been here, I haven't done any of that. I used to, try to do different things, and that's just always been kind of a desire of mine, is to get the word out and teach it in a way that is easy to understand. And because for me, I think God's word it should be fairly simple. And I don't think he's going to try to make it real difficult. Yeah, there's some things in there that you just don't quite understand, but in all, most of it should be fairly simple. And otherwise, it would make it virtually impossible for us to follow what it is that he wants. So I like to try to bring it out in an easy way. So this podcast, he gave me that idea, and that was one of my big things of, knowing who you are. And I was always one of those that I believe that if you know who you are in Christ, then your walk with him is going to be so much more fruitful. And if you look at your life, and I'm seeing this a lot with kids right now, that they don't know who they are. There's a big identity crisis going on right now, and they just don't know who they are. If you know who you are, whether or not, even outside of the being a believer, if you know who you are, even in the secular, then nobody's going to be able to come up to you and tell you, no, that's not who you are. You're this. No, that's definitely not who I am. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. And then second, selfishly, if I'm going to do that, then that means I'm going to have to be in God's word. I'm going to have to be studying, because if I'm trying to put out stuff that is not backed by God's word, you're going to know. So I'm going to have to get in there and actually study. It's the same thing with training. I could tell people that I lift all the time, all I want, but if it doesn't look like I've been lifting, well, am I? Or am I taking care of myself? Yeah, just because I lift doesn't mean that I'm taking care of my body outside of that training part of it. So I want my life to be kind of a full balance. And this is all part of that, of taking that and turning it into something positive. I want to make sure that I'm talking about our son instead of hiding the pain. I want to share that story. I want to share it again, which is why I started this podcast, to get that story out, to also, and again, like I said, selfishly, I think it's going to be a healing process for myself, to where I can actually get some healing in my life as well. Remember, I shared earlier that strength grows slowly. It's not overnight. This is a process. It's just like if you went to the gym, you're trying to build muscle. You don't get ripped in 30 days or 2 weeks. It just doesn't happen. There is a process. I've been at this for a long time, and am I where I want to be? No. Am I ever going to be probably where I want to be? Probably not, because I usually have expectations that are not really what they need to be. So, and I'm okay with that. I just know that as long as I'm feeling good, and the older I get, if I feel good while I'm working out, or if I feel good during the day, I'm not sore all the time or whatever, then I'm okay with that. I get the occasional people asking me how old I am and then telling me I look great. So that's usually enough of a pat on my back to say, you know what, I'm doing something right. And which I guess is kind of the same thing with, our son. People, hey, you know what, you look like you're really doing good. So hopefully I'm taking this and I'm able to turn this into something positive. So I think it's been a little bit. I'm coming up on about 40 minutes, so I think I'm going to cut it off there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that episode, and we'll be back again. Like I said, I plan on putting one of these out about every week. And if you're hurting right now, just remember that you're not weak. Remember, grief is heavy. I kind of covered that earlier. That's why I like these sandbags right now. They're heavy, they're awkward, and they're hard to pick up and move. And grief is the same way. Sometimes it just feels like it is just so heavy and awkward, and it's just so hard to get up and move sometimes. But just know that you're going to get there. You're going to get to where you need to be. And remember that you have a choice about who you become. So doesn't matter what happened to you or what. You may not have had the choice in what, I mean, we didn't have a choice in what happened to us, but who I become afterwards, I have a full choice in that. So make sure you guys come back next week and look forward to this episode coming out or the next one coming out. Sorry. Here I go. I'm just kind of rambling towards the end. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode.